Now then, the newly elected leader of UKIP, Paul Nuttall, says he can win Labour voters over to his party. It's a threat of particular relevance to MPs in the north of England, perhaps, where a large majority of people voted to leave the EU in the referendum. A lot of Labour MPs there. Of course, I'm joined now by Angela Eagle, a Labour MP for Wallasey, who stood against Jeremy Corbyn in the party's leadership race. And a very good morning to you. How worried are you about UKIP's performance so far and Paul Nuttall's ambitions?
Well, nobody should ever take their own safe seats for granted. I never have taken my seat for granted. I campaign all year round. But I think we have to get this into perspective. Paul Nuttall stood in Bootle as a Conservative in the council elections this century and did very badly. He's a right-wing Conservative. He's on record saying he wants to privatise the NHS and get competition in, which Labour voters are not going to be impressed by. He actually thinks that employment rights are a waste of time, and he said maternity pay was actually mad and counterproductive. Now, what is exactly mad about allowing a woman who's pregnant to go off and have her baby and get back to work afterwards?
So do you think you have to have a bit of a policy examination? You have to get on the front foot as Labour and say to people who voted Brexit, perhaps thinking, well, UKIP had a better message than your Remain campaign in there, that may be tempted to stay with UKIP. You're going to say, well, look at their economic policies, look at their social policies, do a forensic examination of that, and that will hold them.
I mean, Liverpool actually voted 60% to Remain, by the way. I mean, people don't understand that it's a more nuanced, it's a more nuanced thing. But actually, what we've got to do is say, we understand that people are hurting in communities, particularly places where there have been huge cuts due to austerity, where people have seen their job opportunities dwindle, or they're working twice as hard for the same money or even less. We know there's been a 10% fall in real wages since 2008. So we've got to recognise that. But there are Labour responses to that aren't about right-wing economics and right-wing social policy. And
so you do agree with that? You're going to point those out. You're going to put those front and centre. The other message from UKIP.
Well, there are solutions to the housing shortage. We have to build more affordable houses that people on modest earnings can aspire to live in and go and live in, and then we've got to allow them to have job opportunities and economic opportunities to increase their wages.
It's interesting you touched on housing there, because we've been skirting around the issue and we have to cut to the quick here and talk about immigration. And I talked about perhaps a policy swap here, and a lot of people's analysis of, for instance, pressures on housing are that too much immigration. That puts pressure on social housing in particular, and indeed the overall housing stock. More people equals more demand for accommodation. Do you think Labour can continue with its current policy on immigration,
well, I have to say,
as espoused by the leader?
I have to say, the first thing to say in all of this is that not every problem in our country is created by immigration. UKIP would like to persuade people that it is, and they always go to that politics of grievance and division. Most of our communities, I don't think, want to see us dividing along either race lines or religious lines. They want to see how we can unite as communities and make our society better. That's the Labour way.
But could you defend free movement of peoples within the European Union or within the new arrangement that the UK comes to with the European Union?
We don't know what the new arrangements are going to be. Because
would you like to see that?
Well, look, we've got a government that won't tell us what their plan is. That's why it's important that as the Brexit negotiations go on, we have some attempt, and so far Theresa May hasn't done this, to try to bring our country back together. I've never known people so angry. The 52% of people are on one side, the 48% of people who voted to Remain think they're not being listened to, and we've got a Prime Minister that sent precisely the wrong signals out of her speech in Birmingham, saying that we were going to go for hard Brexit, which implies an economy that's less wealthy, and it implies fewer jobs and fewer economic opportunities.
Just to nail down that, you know, you've examined the Brexit vote. You know what a lot of that was about. Not all of it, but a lot of it was about migration within the European Union.
Some of it was. Some of it was.
Would you say to voters, because it seems to be Labour is still saying then, we will alleviate the conditions in some areas created by these movements of people. They need more cash, they need more social housing, they need more money put into health and education and libraries and all that infrastructure. or let's control it? Because that seems to be the conclusion that many people have come to.
Nobody is against controlled immigration. Very, very few people are in favour of completely open borders everywhere. And in fact, when we're in the EU, what we did say was that there should be a free movement of workers. We were never in the Schengen arrangements, which allow free movement of people. We signed up to free movement of those that have already got jobs, and there's quid pro quo with that. Many Brits work abroad in the European Union, do very well and come back, and there's that exchange in our scientific communities which benefits all of our economies. So we've got to see what we can do to bring about the best possible soft Brexit. Unfortunately, the current government are not telling Parliament what is in their minds. We're finding out with leaks what different bits of the government want to do, and it's getting more vicious by the minute. What Theresa May ought to do is come to Parliament with a plan so we can have a proper debate and try to heal the divisions in our country, make the best of the situation that we find ourselves in, and get the best possible deal for our economic policy and for our future in Europe.
I don't want to keep focusing on the party as the official opposition who were in government only 6 and a bit years ago.
Yeah.
Seem to be nowhere. Look at the Richmond by-election. They're an opportunity to make that very argument. Who made it? The Lib Dems.
Well, look, I mean, it used to be a Lib Dem seat. It was a very unusual...
You're losing your deposit.
6 years ago.
You get fewer votes than you have members.
Well, I mean, clearly the issue there was about who could beat Zac Goldsmith, and most people there obviously wanted to see Zac Goldsmith punished, some because of the disgraceful mayoral campaign he ran that was racist, and others because they couldn't stand the fact that he had been a Leave voter.
So an opportunity for Labour. I mean, that analysis, in the old days, if you had a nice centrist like Tony Blair or Gordon Brown...
I agree that it's painful when you're not involved as a challenger in any by-election, but I think you have to recognise that the Lib Dems held that seat until 6 years ago, and it was Zac Goldsmith that took it off them. They were always in a better position to squeeze the vote. I'm not talking about you winning it,
but, that pathetic performance.
Well, look, in by-elections, obviously our vote was squeezed because our voters felt that getting rid of Zac Goldsmith was more important than voting Labour in that particular
Labour,
instance.
we were told only 6-7 years ago, the natural party of government.
Politics is dynamic, and if you do not reinvent your appeal to the British people and answer their issues and questions, then you're going to have difficulties. That is what we have to take.
And you would accept you haven't done that?
We are in the middle of doing it. We're in opposition. We've now lost 2 elections, and we have to make certain that we go back to the basic questions which brought us into existence. And we're never needed more now. Look at people who work. They're not earning reasonable wages a lot of the time, and a lot of the benefits of economic activity are going to those who own rather than those who work to create the wealth. That's why the Labour Party came into existence in the first place. We've got to redouble our efforts to say, how do we create a society where those who work and create the wealth can actually benefit from a fair amount of it? That is the policy work that is going on now for the Labour Party. That is how we will ensure that we appeal to more than just our core voters, but to voters up and down the country.
Which brings us to leadership. We've been talking about other leaders. You've been talking about the Prime Minister. We've been talking about Paul Nuttall. I mean, have you revised your opinion of Jeremy Corbyn? You obviously thought he was pretty hopeless when you stood against him. Has he got better?
Look, I think in the aftermath of the Brexit vote, there was a great deal of emotion and anger. The Labour members have given him a mandate, and that is what we will work with. He's just made a speech in Europe saying that we've got to ensure that we redouble our efforts to provide Labour answers to the real problems and issues that are causing the rise of the populist right in Europe. That is what we've got to do. That is our historic role, and he's right to identify it.
I'm fascinated by what you said there about a lot of anger and emotion. Did that cloud your judgment? Are you saying it's that made you stand against Jeremy Corbyn?
No. I think there was an anger and emotion about the Brexit vote in the aftermath of the Brexit vote.
Well, you must be angry. I mean, you were on the other side.
Yes, I resigned because I felt that we hadn't...
And that Jeremy Corbyn didn't do enough during the campaign.
My comments on the record are well known. But I accept the democracy of the party. The party's made a decision. We are now working together to do that policy work to ensure that we can appeal to the electorate up and down the country, not only our core votes, to see off any threat that UKIP are offering in our northern heartlands, but also to make sure that we can take our appeal beyond just Labour out into the country as a whole, because that's the only way you win elections.
Well, what do you say to those senior figures, front bench figures within your party who say, well, look, we've got to bite the bullet. We've got to go for a progressive alliance in seats that Labour can't win, but perhaps the Lib Dems or indeed others, maybe the Greens have a better chance. Don't stand Labour
the Greens have
candidates,
one.
Support them.
Okay, well, let's stay with the
Lib Dems, and we may be seeing, some kind of realignment. And what about in Scotland? You haven't just got the squeeze; you've got a three-pronged attack on Labour heartlands. What about a progressive alliance, as Clive Lewis is talking about?
Well, I don't agree with the analysis that we have to have a progressive alliance in that way. Partially because it doesn't actually win us an election. If you add up Lib Dem votes with Green votes and you look at where they are in particular constituencies, I think it wins us 4 seats or something. So it doesn't do the job. We have got to remake our appeal to the electorate and voters by talking about the things that they care about most, whether they can have somewhere to live, whether they can have a job that pays, whether they can start a family, whether their children can have better prospects than they have. These are the basic bread and butter issues of politics, and that's what we have to concentrate on, not adding up false bits of votes that are not Tory and somehow thinking that you can cobble together an anti-Tory alliance. The only Green MP in the House of Commons, Caroline Lucas, her main opponent, the only way she will lose her seat is if we have a Labour seat there. That is not the basis from which to have a progressive alliance.
But in our system,
keeps the Tories laughing.
In our system, it's not about the number of seats you have. And look at UKIP and their 1 MP and their 4 million plus vote during the general election. But a lot of those votes cost Labour seats. They let other parties in. Of course, we all know that's the way it works. I mean, you've got to go on a full-scale offensive against that UKIP vote. And what we're seeing at the moment in UKIP voters who say they are switching, majority of them, vast majority, go back to the Conservatives.
Yes, I mean, UKIP are a party of the right. And what we've got to do as a party of the progressive side of government, and this is an issue...
Are you giving up on them? Do you not think you can win them over, UKIP voters?
No, UKIP voters... UKIP are a party of the right. What we've got to say to UKIP voters is those right-wing approaches, privatising the NHS, thinking that employment rights are somehow nice to have but can be abolished because they're mad, to quote Paul Nuttall, that is not in the best interests of working people or their communities up and down our country, and neither is the politics of division and grievance which sets one group of people against another. We can only work together and make progress as a country now if we bring the 48% together with the 52% and chart a way forwards for our country, which is in the best interests of our own economy, but the people who live in our societies up and down the country. You don't do that by setting one bit of the country up against another. And I think it's to the eternal shame of the Conservative Party that they've divided the country. And the Prime Minister has shown no interest so far in leading the country to unite it in the aftermath of the most divisive thing that's happened in post-war politics.
And back to that, I mean, for you're going for the 100% then, but you think Jeremy Corbyn...
Well, I like to aspire.
Well, that would be something. That really would. That'd be Chinese then, getting 100%.
Well, no, I mean, I think
of
opposition is an important process in democracy. 100% is always a bit
But the serious
worrying.
question, I mean, is Jeremy Corbyn the man? Is he at the van of that movement? Does he look like a unifier, like a uniter?
Look, I'm not here to have some kind of commentary on how Jeremy is doing as leader. We've got to do this policy work.
There seems to be a bit of an open goal there.
I think
the Lib Dems, we're going around in circles, it's back to what the Lib Dems took advantage of in Richmond. OK, you're saying it wasn't Labour territory. We've got another by-election coming up. Labour are nowhere in Sleaford. Talking about the Lib Dems perhaps taking that, UKIP doing well. Labour used to be the party of government, are the official opposition, and you're not making an impact.
Well, it's clear that we have a big task ahead of us, and I think it's a task, if you look across Europe, that other parties of the centre-left have got as well. It's not unique to the UK. In fact, if you look at the opinion poll ratings of the Labour Party, they are a lot higher than the ratings of a lot of our sister parties. But it's clear we have to remake social democracy and democratic socialism for new times. And as I said earlier, the key issue for us is how can we create a society where those who do the work and generate prosperity get a fair share of it, That is the question that brought the Labour Party into existence in the first place, but we have to have 21st century answers to that age-old question.
Angela Eagle, very good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed.